Next up is a high-level roundtable discussion on a topic that's top of mind for all of us, focused on the new bundles. I'd like to welcome your moderator. Please welcome Jeff Baumgartner, editor of Next TV and technology editor of Multichannel News, and his panelists. Jeff?
Thank you, sir. All right. Thank you, Louis. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And thanks for everybody here for joining us today at the Next TV Summit. I think this panel is a great fit with what's next for TV, and that's this notion of the quote-unquote new bundles and the ongoing shift away from, or at least to kind of complement the traditional big bundle. And that topic can span everything from skinny bundles to standalone services and other add-ons that are becoming popular as programmers and MVPDs alike try to defend against cord cutting and embrace how consumers, particularly millennial audiences, want to get their TV content. And in more and more of these cases, what they don't want is the old traditional big bundle. And they're also more apt to self-aggregate by more specialized bundles and even tap into some a la carte offerings. At least that's what we hear and what some of the research tends to suggest. And I think we've got a great panel assembled here today to kind of dig into and debate this topic. So I'm going to do some quick introductions. From my left is Kris Nagel, the Senior Vice President Worldwide Field Operations at Vindicia. Vindicia, excuse me. And then next to him is Brent Smith, President and CTO and co-founder of Evolution Digital. And on the end we have Ben Weinberger, the Senior Vice President and Chief Product Officer at Sling TV. Now, as for the format, we're just going to be doing straight Q&A. So if you have questions to pose to our panel, I'll leave some time at the end, and we'll have somebody bring a microphone to you. And but before we dive in, what I'd like to do is have each of you expand a bit on your background and your role at your respective companies and kind of how you fit into the broader TV ecosystem in this idea of the new bundle. And I think each of you has a slide or a short video to show, so we're going to get started there, I think, with Kris. Yeah, there we go.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I am Kris Nagel from Vindicia. If I could change that name, I would. There's always a test on how to pronounce it. I'm VP of Worldwide Operations. I've been in the video space since probably 20 years now. Responsible for the worldwide team that are selling to potential clients and then implementing those clients out in the field. Vindicia is a billing payment monetization platform. We've been in business about 10 years. We are focused purely on digital services. So we've got about 220 million consumer accounts in our database that we're actively billing monthly. We've got about 190 million payment instruments. So we have a tremendous amount of data, and everything that we do is data-oriented. On the slide here, you'll see kind of 4 topical areas, and I think I'll probably weave these through the conversation this morning. The first is the customer life cycle. So understanding where a user is in their life cycle. Are they evaluating a service? Have they purchased a service? Are they preparing to turn off the service? And creating the appropriate plans and methods to save or get them to purchase more over time. Secondly, personalization. This is the idea of allowing users to purchase what they want, how they want, and using the payment method of their choice. We'll talk a lot about the skinny bundles. We'll talk about purchase mechanisms for consumers. I would also wrap into this the idea of frictionless commerce, and I think I'll make probably a couple controversial statements about that as we go through. And then the idea of using data to make decisions. Our business is a data business. There are many other vendors in this space that have a massive amount of data that service providers can use to their benefit. And finally, being able to iterate rapidly, being able to try new things, to see what works in the market, to set up services and tear down services. You'll see across the bottom just a short listing of some of our clients: DirecTV, Foxtel. We work with content owners, we work with service providers, we work with content aggregators. And actually, just this morning, we announced our relationship with BBC. So we are the billing and payment engine behind the new BBC Store offering on a global basis. The initial focus is in the UK, but there will be offers coming throughout around the world over the coming months.
All right, thanks, Kris. And then I think the next one is for Brent. Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yes, we're sort of, Evolution Digital is a kind of an interesting animal here because we're more attuned to the cable industry itself. We've been around for probably about 8 years. We're a bit of a disruptor in the cable space because what we really attempted to do is find a way for cable operators to have a new way of delivering content and getting away from the traditional big bundle and to be able to also offer IP-based services, OTT, those sorts of things. So we started out as a one-way box provider for helping operators go all digital, which has been extremely successful in the US market. But we spent quite a bit of time developing new technologies around blending traditional cable TV boxes with IP or IP-enabled boxes. So we've sold about 2.5 million of these devices out in the Latin American market and the Caribbean. Again, the idea is to bridge the two, traditional cable as well as OTT. And finally, we've just actually acquired a new company around IP video on demand, so SVOD, TVOD, IP linear. The whole approach here is how do we help economically have operators transition to IP? And so then we're a bit of a disruptor in that respect. And so again, ideally, what we want to do is take the old guard cable operator who's wildly successful with broadband services but is seeing a decline in video. How do we help encourage and allow more OTT providers access to that broadband platform, but also blending good old traditional TV with that? Because up until now, I think people still watch the primary programming on their primary TV set, and the rest of the content, although ingested on mobile devices and third-party devices, still when you get to the TV at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, you're watching the main TV. So we're here to help the operator, and that's kind of our approach here.
Okay, and I think the last one we have is for Ben, Sling TV.
Great, thanks. So I'm Ben Weinberger. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Sling TV. Prior to Sling, I had founded a company called Digital Smiths that was all about search, recommendations, content discovery, personalization, and selling that in a cloud-based form to operators, so folks like Time Warner Cable, Charter, DirecTV, et cetera. And in 2014, sold that to TiVo. So TiVo now has taken that forward and has incorporated that into a lot of their offerings and is continuing to expand. One of the board members I had was a gentleman named Roger Lynch, and some of you guys may know Roger is the CEO at Sling TV. So Roger and I got talking, and Sling just sounded about the coolest thing I could think of doing post the exit and transition, and really taking everything that I had done with Digital Smiths and bringing that into Sling TV. So how do you make a next generation TV service truly next generation? You know, what can you do that you could never do in a traditional set-top, as you just heard, and how do you do things maybe in an IP-based world that would be very difficult? So Sling TV, if you're not familiar, is a IP-based video service that is live, linear, on demand. You've got kind of all the normal things that you might expect from a TV service. You get what we call the best of live TV, which is truly some of the best content. So you get things like ESPN, AMC, TNT, news channels, sports, movies. You get the whole blockbuster library to you that used to be a separate entity, now is part of Sling TV. So you can have transactional, on-demand content. We have over 10,000 hours of on-demand content now. And you get all of that for $20 a month. And you can turn it on and off whenever you want to. There's no commitments, there's no contracts, there's no background or credit checks, there's no installation or scheduling of somebody to come out to your house, which means you can use it on really almost any device you could think of. So you've got your mobile devices like your phone and your tablets, your desktop, PC, and Mac. You've got devices like Roku, Fire TV, Xbox, Chromecast, a whole variety of things, including smart TVs as well. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but the idea being that you really should be able to watch it on the device and the time and the location that you want to. So you're not stuck to your home like a traditional TV everywhere offering might be. You really can take this anywhere. So you could be sitting here watching Sling TV in the audience if I'm that uninteresting, I guess. You
Is
can watch
anybody
on
watching it now? Just
yeah, if anybody's watching right now, thank you for supporting us. You know, on the train ride, in your hotel room, wherever you want to go with it. There's no restrictions to where you want to watch it other than outside of the U.S. So the offering a year ago when we started was very limited, 12 channels. Now there's over 60 U.S. channels, and there's hundreds of international channels, as you heard Steve from Roku say. We have a very broad international offering covering over 20 different languages. So a lot of choice, a lot of flexibility, you know, the way you want it, the device you want it, for a very low price point. And I'm sure we'll talk about why and what all that means, but it's a little bit of background on Sling.
All right, thank you, Ben. So let's, now we've kind of set the table here, got our bearings on who everybody is and what they're doing. You know, let's start kind of a high level. And I think, you know, a lot of us are kind of aware of what's happening, but let's just talk a little bit about, you know, what's kind of occurring in the pay TV industry right now and with respect to the bundle and, you know, what's kind of driving the trend toward new offerings, including, you know, skinny or slim down offerings that kind of branch off, you know, from the traditional big bundles. So, you know, from a high level, what's happening from your point of view? Whoever wants to jump in first, go ahead.
I'll jump in because we often are characterized as skinny
Yeah.
bundle or slim bundle. You know, one of the things that we like to think about with Sling TV is that the notion of a skinny bundle is really the traditional operator trying to say, look, you don't have to take this huge package. You can take a skinnier, smaller bundle. You don't have to have that fat bundle, if you will. Sling TV, it is only one offering. There isn't a skinny or a fat or, you know, different sizes, whatever it might be. I think the notion of the skinny bundle is to try to say, look, you know, we're your traditional operator. We don't want you to leave, so we're going to give you this slimmed down version of things. But you still have to take our internet. You know, we prefer you take the double play or the triple play or whatever it might be. But we'll get you a kind of a smaller version of things. What often happens, well, everybody that I'm aware of, the way it happens is you end up losing a lot of that best content. So you don't get ESPN, as an example, or you don't get some of the best live stuff that, you know, really is driving a lot of the reason for you to even have a TV. You know, whereas, I don't want this to be a commercial for Sling, but the approach that we've taken is there is no, you know, tiers. It's just, there's one offering. It's $20. You get the best stuff. So I think the notion of the bundle is one that is, you know, coming undone or unbundling. But you've got to pair it up. You know, they've got to still get you to take the underlying bandwidth and other things. That's what makes the economics work for the traditional operators.
Okay. And Brent, you know, you're pretty close to the cable operators, so you have maybe a different, or yeah, I guess a similar, you know, view of the world. But
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a couple of things that get completely overlooked when we start talking about the cable operator, and trust me, there's all sorts of reasons to be frustrated with them being kind of a monopolistic approach, you know, because you've got broadband connectivity along with selling video. But I think people forget the fact that in many cases the operator is encumbered by whatever contract deals that they've got with the programmers. So as you've seen consolidation within the content side of things, Viacom, News Corp, when they go and negotiate, they negotiate saying, oh, you can take ESPN, but you've got to take 25 others, and you've got to take ESPN 18, and you've got to, you know, on the Disney side of things, there's a whole bunch of other content that has to be packaged with it. So despite what most consumers think, the operator isn't necessarily forcing big bundles. The content providers have forced that packaging and that bundling. So as we've seen over the last little while, where HBO and others in ESPN are now offering, you know, something that's separate to the cable operator, where there's not an attachment or entitlement associated with it, those bundles may, in a negotiation, may be relaxed. So you may see, and I think this will happen over the next little while, where cable operators are able to do things a little more creatively on a bundling side. But I agree with you that it's one of those things where you have to understand that the way that the content negotiations are put in front of the cable operator, they're sometimes restricted on what they can offer.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I mean, we in our business we see kind of two distinct camps. You've got the carriers or the traditional operators that are bounded by these carriage agreements. As much as they would like to do something different, they can't. And with the carriers that we're working with today, the cable providers, the MVPDs, it is more often than not, it's a defensive strategy to protect the internet access broadband business, right? They've got to protect that. That's kind of the holy grail going forward in their eyes. The flip side to the skinny bundle is what you see happening in sport and elsewhere, where you've got this opportunity to create bundles of sport packages, whether it be at the league level, the team level, cross-league level, and those sorts of things that I think start to get really, really interesting from a consumer perspective. You know, if I'm interested in a particular team or a particular league, my ability to purchase a bundle of offerings associated with that gets to be pretty interesting at the consumer level.
Yeah, you guys talked a little bit about how maybe distribution deals have started to loosen up a lot. I mean, obviously, I don't think Sling TV could exist if things were not a little more elastic, than they used to be. But I guess, how has that kind of evolved over the last couple of years? And is there any possibility you might see like kind of a pie in the sky idea of like true a la carte, or is that going to continue to be that pie in the sky?
Well, it's kind of interesting. There's an experiment going up in Canada where the regulatory body has essentially forced a la carte into the marketplace. And it'll be interesting to see what happens from that. I don't think anybody has a crystal ball on this, but there's just general fragmentation everywhere. When you look at trying to reorganize whatever package you have from the cable operator, you're now subject to this great opportunity where you have content over the top from just about anywhere. But again, it's a fragmentation where if you as a consumer, great, I've got access to all this different content, but how do I get it? How do I find it? How many devices do I need to go and get that content? And so you end up chasing yourself around with different HDMI inputs, with different devices. And so I think the pendulum has swung clearly over to the far end, which is great because it creates more content. It creates the opportunity for more people to get involved in delivering content. But the pendulum's got to swing back at some point where you go, how do I get this? And what is a meaningful way for me to find this content? Because I don't want to spend an hour searching for what I want. So that's kind of how we see it.
Yeah, I would agree with our clients that do. They do a fair amount of experimentation in given geographies, given markets, and there's definitely frustration on the user's part when they go completely a la carte, right? This is the Cheesecake Factory menu, right? What do I want? How do I get it? How do I pull it together? It gets extremely confusing at the end consumer level. I think this kind of ties back to the personalization comment that I made earlier about our ability to use data and consumer behavior metrics to create packages and bundles and offerings that are aligned to a given set of users. It may not be spot on, but our ability to react and create new products and services as soon as we see the uptake or the lack of uptake on a particular product is very important. I think a complete free-for-all will fail from the consumer's perspective. They need some assistance through that process. Yeah.
I think the addition, I agree completely with the discoverability and those sort of issues, but I think the other factor is the price. And you hear about this a lot, but the reality is, and it's a lot of what Brent said in the beginning, if you take a look at the contracts that are in place and you really think about what it would mean to create total, true a la carte, and you take the things that you really want, I really want ESPN, I really want AMC, et cetera, go down the line, all of a sudden you end up with something that's $30. And you say, well, gosh, $30, I should have just gone and gotten a basic cable subscription, or I should have gotten Sling TV, or I should have gotten some hybrid of offering. So I think when you combine the pricing and contract pressures, you combine the discoverability, and you combine the sort of the device conundrum of not everything is actually available on all the devices. Forget even finding it, but the app may not even exist on Fire TV. There's relationships between these companies where they don't carry each other's apps reciprocally. So that makes it almost impossible to have a cohesive consumer device, and you end up going all the way back to this well, maybe the bundling does make sense. Maybe the aggregation from a traditional operator actually is really helpful. So there's aspects of that I think are positive.
Yeah, and maybe I wonder if we can talk a little bit about some of the trends you're seeing at Sling TV, right? Because you have the core offering, and then you have a lot of different add-on packages, which is kind of mini bundles attached to the core bundle. So, are you seeing a lot of customers taking these add-on packages, and in addition to that, are these more like self-aggregators? They tend to also subscribe to like Hulu and other services that kind of complement, and they like to kind of piece it together themselves.
What's interesting is when we launched the product and went to market, everything was about millennials, and everybody said, "Oh, this is a millennial-focused service," and it is, and there's a very high degree of millennial acquisition that occurs. But when you look at those extra packs, as Jeff alluded to, there's things like sports. So if you want more sports for $5 a month, you can add on a whole bunch of sports channels. If you want more kids content, there's a kids pack for $5. So there's all these $5 add-ons. And the reason I mentioned the millennials comment is we see very high take rates on lots of the bundles. So the kids pack, for example, you wouldn't associate that traditionally with millennials. You'd say, it's probably somebody who is a little bit later on in life and has younger kids that would like to get more content. So we haven't released numbers, but what we can say is we're really happy with the take rates. These are people who say, I like the $20 pack, but I also want to use that $5 add-on, maybe just for the football season or the basketball season or whatever it might be for a period of time. And then they turn that off, and then they might try something else. So while we don't release the numbers, one of the things it has shown us is the service is appealing to a very broad spectrum of people. So you've got millennials, you've got people with kids and families, and then you also look at the international content, and you see a high trend of people taking, it could be Arabic or Urdu or Latino packages. And this crosses a broad demographic. This could be people who are relocated parents living with kids in the U.S. and want to get content from wherever they moved from. It could be kids who grew up in other countries and want that content. Kids meaning, all ages of us kids. So, I think what we're seeing as far as trends is, one, people like all these additions and this optionality, and two, it gives us some insight into a very wide degree of people who are enjoying the service and want to experiment and try different things.
And maybe kind of along those lines for Brent and Kris. I mean, Brent, we'll start with you with traditional cable operators. The idea of millennials, it seems like everyone's chasing after these leprechauns. Where are they? They're hiding, and they're really hard to find. But what are the cable operators asking you about and saying, well, can you help us with X, Y, and Z, and how do kind of millennials fit in there, and how are you approaching that? And then, same thing with Kris, with your customers. How focused has it been on, these coveted millennial audiences?
Well, it's a multi-faceted response here because again, if you look at the traditional cable operator, what he's done is he's repackaged content. He's taken aggregated content, but traditional linear sort of for the most part, and then he would have a video on demand service which included SVOD and so forth. The problem that they've had is that it's the user interface, the search, the way to access this content is dated. And when you compare that to some of the new innovative stuff that's coming out, like Sling and so forth, the user interface is so much more attractive. So what we're hearing from operators is they need the next generation platform that, again, encompasses not only traditional cable services, which are still delivered in a managed way. And the thing that's not talked about really right now is that there's the focus on getting more content, and the fact that it's over the internet is great, but it's not managed, which means that depending on your internet connection and so forth, there's going to be a point in time where quality of service becomes a factor. And so what the cable operator's done pretty successfully over the many years is giving you a quality service, quality content, and the video is nailed up, let's say. So they need to augment that with the move to IP. So basically, what we've come to them with is this little device here, which is a combination set-top box and an IP over-the-top device. So it encompasses access to the regular distribution of managed services in the QAM, traditional cables manner, but it is also IP connected. So in the box, it combines those two. So if you've got over-the-top services, and we don't want to take favorites, whatever content is popular and is trending should be accessible on this box, but it's blended with a unified interface. So when you talk about saying, I want to go and watch content, I don't know where it's coming from. All I know is if I've got one user interface, I can find it, I can play it, and I don't have to go to multiple devices. That's the critical part for them. So essentially what we're trying to do is give them a bridging device. So this box, which has not been available prior to basically this year, it's a box that can act like a traditional cable box, but provides the growth, and we want to cap their investment in the old traditional way. We want them to encourage access to all of the over-the-top services, but ultimately have a single user interface. And that's our end game, is that we want to help the operator be the aggregator of choice for content and not pick winners.
Okay, go ahead, Kris.
Sure. So I will say the feverish pitch around millennials has kind of subsided a little bit over the course of the last year, which is interesting. I think when I look at the market, right, millennials in particular, there are two core issues we're always discussing with clients. The millennial market is a mobile market, right? If you look at mobile growth, both in short form and long form, primary users are millennials, right? So being where they want to watch, when they want to watch it, is on that mobile device, whether it be an iPhone, not so much an iPad, but typically the phone that they're using and have with them everywhere. The second particular topic is what kind of offers are interesting, right? The millennial generation is all about free trials. Let me try it, let me see how it works, and then I'll pay for it. Right, and being very liberal with your free trials, being very liberal with your refunds, being able to allow them to dip their toe before they jump all the way in. Once they jump all the way in, you've got them, but you got to allow them to try the service. And last but not least is payment, right? So we have a group of people that may or may not have credit cards. They may or may not have mom and dad's permission to be watching the video that they want to pay for. You've got obviously Google and Apple having a major corner on the video space as well. So understanding who that millennial is, what kind of content it is, where they're watching it, and then presenting to them offers that allow them to pay for it in the way that they want to at the time of purchase. So it's kind of easy in, easy out with the right and appropriate payment mechanisms at the time.
One thing to build on that we've seen too is an interesting trend where when you have a potential subscriber and we look at the information they provide us, the age at which somebody decides that it's okay to pay for TV is really black and white. You think millennials are of a certain age or a certain demographic, and what we see is as soon as that person turns roughly 22 or 23 years old, then all of a sudden they pay for TV. So at 21, 20, 21, borderline 22, and you can kind of correlate that to maybe first job, first apartment. They're moving out of the 6 people in a house, sharing the cable bill. And so they become Sling subscribers, very early. So to your point, I think once they get in and they like it, they'll stay. But there's that magic, like 23 years old, and all of a sudden now you want TV. So and
That's
you
when
wanna
they
take it with
become
you.
responsible citizens from a video perspective.
Right, and they vote. And
Yeah, okay. Now, Brent, I think it's interesting, when you're talking about this hybrid approach and the ability for, an MVPD to offer over-the-top content. And, there's an amazing amount of over-the-top services out there. We just had Steve with Roku, talking about 3,000, almost 3,000 channels. So in your approach, though, is the operator essentially the gatekeeper on what apps will be allowed? So like technically speaking, could they allow Sling TV onto their device? If they, what's kind of the gating process that you're expecting there?
Actually, it's not so much the technical part, it's really contractual arrangements with the content providers or the aggregator themselves. So we have a relationship with TiVo, who's one of the partners who will be using this box. And this thing accesses Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, YouTube, the list goes on.
Sling.
The issue then is the cable operator, in some cases, has to have a direct agreement with the likes of Netflix or Amazon, because there's certain terms and conditions around the content that is distributed. Is there overlap with the cable operators' agreements with their content providers on a linear basis? So it's a little more complicated. It's not a technical issue as much as it is. For example, Netflix originally on a TiVo box on a retail side could be put on the box, but if the cable operator took that box and leased it or rented it to the customer, he couldn't have Netflix on it. So Netflix had to go to the studios and completely reorganize their agreements. So it's all kind of early days, but Hulu, Amazon, Netflix in particular, they've all basically harmonized their agreements so that cable operators can do that. And I'm not sure on the Sling side, but
Yeah.
You know, it's almost the opposite, actually, because we are an operator of sorts. And so if you look at Dish Network, which, if you're not familiar, Sling TV is born out of Dish, the Netflix opportunity exists within the Hopper set-top box. So you can go in there and you can get your Netflix content and you can, you know, sort of do it. And they're the only operator that natively built that in. So in the same way, you know, Sling TV will be looking at ways of what other content can we incorporate that we're okay with, you know, we don't violate any of the rules or contracts with, but you could find it all within Sling TV because, you know, the millennials and others aren't going to tolerate 6 apps.
Yep. Good.
I was just going to say that, and this is the part that we'll see over the next few months and years, is that metadata is critical to this whole thing. I mean, we talk about 3,000 channels. Well, wasn't that long ago we said 50 channels and nothing's on? It's now 3,000 channels and I can't find anything. So metadata providers, Digital Smiths was one of them, Rovi Cloud Services is another. We feel very strongly that the device needs to have metadata that can encompass all of the content that's accessible in the box. It's one thing to have 3,000 apps, but if you can't find that content, it's almost useless. So, you know, it's really important that as part of the ecosystem that you have a very strong metadata partner that can provide the stuff to search and recommend and discover.
You know, the one question for Ben, I was just thinking of, you know, listening to Brent, you know, because, you know, they work with a lot of independent cable operators. They're all kind of, some of them are, you know, struggling with what to do with the video business, you know, because we've seen some ISPs, maybe more on the telco side, you know, work with like a Dish, you know, for kind of to get their TV offering to their subscribers and complement it with a broadband service. But you know, I was wondering, as you know, cable operators continue to mull, particularly the independent guys, you know, what to do next. You know, has Sling TV had any discussions or interest, you know, from them on you know, how maybe they could work with you to provide, you know, kind of an offering, some sort of bundled offering to their customers?
Yeah. You know, we tell them just drop your video service and use Sling. It's not as
How does that go
complete.
over?
Yeah, it's evolving conversation. We do have that conversation though, and you know, we're seeing increased comments even publicly from folks saying, you know, our video business is lagging, and our broadband business, as you know, commented earlier, is really what's driving the growth in our service-based business. So, you know, we need to figure out a video alternative, and that ranges, I think, everywhere from traditional cable to some of the telco to some of the fiber-based folks, and those are really interesting because, as a lot of people know, there's dark fiber all over the country, and there's these little ISPs that sort of have bought these up and, you know, lit up these fiber opportunities, and there's no video offering. You know, Sling TV would be a great partner for folks like that, and I think as our content offering grows, it'll probably be a more relevant conversation. You know, right now there's clearly things that we don't offer. The one that gets talked about the most is local channels. You know, we believe you can get those over the air. There's lots of ways you can get those. We're ready to support those once they're ready. The broadcasters are ready to support that. But it's early days, as I said. You know, it's an evolving conversation, and I think it would be a good partnership for some, and for others it probably will never happen.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, good point.
Just a quick point on this. I think there's a real misnomer, the assumption that the cable operators are making enormous sums of money on video. It may have been that a few years ago, but it's just continuously got thinner and thinner as we go along. So the deals that they've had to negotiate have, the pendulum swung much more towards the broadcasters and the content providers. So, we've got a number of operators in the tier 2 space who says, okay, I can get out of video, and which may be, good for Sling, but what they're looking to do is possibly use this device as a broadband video service. So it literally acts like an IP over the top box, but also has access to the broadcast channels. And so in a very skinny package kind of format.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think what we're seeing is a lot of and I mentioned this before, kind of niche content driving usage and capturing and retaining users, right? Think religious content as a big driver, depending on locale, and other sorts of niche content that wouldn't be broad-based are allow the smaller carriers to retain those users because they can't get that content anywhere else. And so there's a whole second tier of whether it be Latino content, religious content, sport content. You look at the Pac-12 and the regional sports networks and those sorts of things that the second tier operators are extremely interested in as a means of retaining some of that video revenue stream.
Okay. Before we have about 5 minutes left, we can take some questions if you'll just wait 1 second for a microphone. We'll have somebody bring it up. We have a couple. Well, why don't you shout it up, sir, in front, and I'll repeat it.
Sure, fine. This question is really for Kris, and it might seem a little naive.
Oh, here you go.
Oh, thank you very kindly. I hope it's not too naive of a question, but my wife and I were a Nielsen household. I was wearing that little pager for a little while. Finally, I realized, that's no good for us, and I didn't want people basically listening to every conversation that I had. But it did make me think about, my consumption of media. Will we ever, from a payment perspective, go to a model where we pay content providers based upon what we consume? Instead of having a bundle from someone else's chosen for me, just basically make micro payments to the shows that I buy. Or watch.
Absolutely, and I think it's happening around the world in many different forms. I mean, you think about pay-per-view sporting events here in the U.S. Obviously, that's massive, but many other markets around the world, there isn't the money on a budgetary basis, on a monthly basis, for people to subscribe to these services. So, there's a broad definition of micropayments. Is it less than $1? Is it less than $5? And there's pros and cons to various different models. But I think there's absolutely a place. If we look across the transaction flow that we have today in the video space, about 40% is subscription, and the balance is individual transactional purchases or transactional purchases on top of subscription services. So it will absolutely happen. It is happening.
Thanks. We have one in the back. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Stefan Richard from Thomson. Maybe a question for Ben. Can you tell us about the drive to go to local channels and offering those in bundles?
So the question is, what's happening on the local side of things? How's it evolving?
Yeah.
It's interesting. If you look outside the U.S., and you see this if you travel actually to a lot of European cities in particular, you see antennas everywhere. And the cable operators did an amazing job of brainwashing everyone years and years ago to say, you have to get your local channels through this cable, and you don't. And actually, they're not even as good quality. However, for a lot of people, setting up an antenna and sort of rigging this thing up is not something you want to tackle. It's increasingly easier. There's companies like Mohu that have the flat antenna you stick to the wall, and it's really, really simple, and the quality is great. So what we're seeing is people who are starting to do that, who have devices, whether it's Xbox or others, that can take an antenna input, maybe Evolution, and you can get your over-the-air content, which typically is your ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, PBS, and Univision, and there's others. There's lots and lots of content. So we see that, and that's an interesting thing that our users are independently doing without us even bringing that up, and combining a Sling TV subscription with locals. And so I think you'll see more technology integration of those as other devices that are in the marketplace that specifically go after local content and make it available to you. We'll see those merging, and Sling TV will definitely be a part of that conversation.
Okay, we probably have time for one more.
My name is Sid. This is a question for Ben. You talk about bringing content, foreign content to the U.S. What about taking the content in the U.S. on worldwide? What is the problem why you can't take Sling TV to areas like the subcontinent or into the Middle East or to the Far East?
It's a great question, and for better or for worse, it comes back to a lot of what's been talked about around rights, where it is amazingly complicated when you start digging down a couple layers and you say, HGTV, why can't I take your content to Europe? And that's a hypothetical scenario. And when you get into it, you say, well, this one program that's on there, or the 20 programs that are on there, are actually owned by this company, this company, this company, and this company. There's maybe 10 different owners of the actual program. And those program owners do not give the right of their content to be seen in most countries outside the US. And if you extrapolate that out and you say a movie channel like Epix or HBO that buys from a lot of different people, they have to go and they have to negotiate sometimes with the individual owners, and oftentimes even with the individual directors, actors, people who it's just not permitted. So they don't even have the rights. ESPN is a great example of that too, where the leagues and the where the content comes from, even if they wanted to do it, which some of them really do want to do, the individual program and content owners don't have the rights for their content to go outside the US. Having said that, it's something that we're actively working very hard on and trying to see, where are the opportunities to offer the ability to take your content outside the US or to travel with your content. And there are some possibilities, and there are some countries that are, make more sense to go first in that context. So definitely evolving one, but it's a pretty complicated area. And the best conversations we have are when someone comes to us and they say, can't we just white label Sling TV? Just call it something else, and we'll just sort of make our own bundle, and isn't that what you guys do? And you get back to these conversations where, no, it's a very specific thing, and the very difficult negotiations, that have put this together for consumers, and to do anything outside of that is really difficult.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for the good question. And with that, I think we are out of time for this panel.